Evening, everyone. I'm so overwhelmed by your attendance. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to waive our appearance fee. Is that okay, boys? Yeah. So it'll be certainly a help there. I hope you people enjoy the evening as well as we will enjoy being part of it. I wanted to tell you about something. How do you like my shirt? I never got any, I was never a sergeant or anything in the Army. I got my stripes tonight. I bought this new shirt, and I really liked it, and I'm very proud of it, and I think it looks good on me myself. It covers up some of my body, and that's a bonus. Anyhow, I got this new shirt, and when I went out and splurged on the shirt, I'll be darned if my wife didn't go out, I don't know if it's get even time or not, she bought a tablecloth. And that was fine. I like to keep things up to date. So we had some company one evening for dinner. And Gail sets out a pretty darn nice table. And of course I was in getting prepped with my new shirt. and I thought I would check the mirror 2 or 3 times. A few bulges here and there, but that's not the shirt. And anyway, I come out and I was really happy. And then as I looked around, I saw the tablecloth. So help me, no one knew what was going on except, and I said, I think I'll go in and change this, Gal, if it's okay with you. Because at that time we didn't want to take all the dishes off the table. So at least we both like the color. And that's a true story. Fortunately, Gal and I we've been able to learn to laugh at each other and with each other. So we got really a huge laugh out of that. And we still use the tablecloth, but not at the same time. I want to tell you people, you came to listen to the Wassons tell some stories about growing up and so on, and we're just an ordinary family. Just a family of a large number of children who grew up in Lakefield. So just to dispel any rumors, it was not our family who told Albert Einstein how to split the atom. We were very, very typical of the many large families that were in Lakefield at that time. The Dunfords, Alec, Braden, Clifford, Royden, Marjorie, and I could go on, and some will say, well, you have already, but anyway. The Calburys, the Heffernans, the Wanamakers, and I'm so pleased, we see all those other people, but I'm so pleased to have Joanne Wanamaker with us this evening, and the Spencers, and many, many more. They could be up here telling similar stories that you're going to hear from us. And there are also many, many other families that we will mention during the evening who touched our lives in a very meaningful way. In the area that we grew up, in the era, family planning was limited to, I wonder who's coming for Christmas. Like many large families, it was a struggle. And a struggle to survive and to pay the bills, but we always succeeded. And I don't ever remember being hungry, except for last night. You could have done a lot better as far as I'm concerned, Dale. Anyway, our family has strong ties to Warsaw, and we have many fond memories of that hamlet, because the Wassons lived there for 110 years, 1831 to 1941. But we also love Lakefield, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Many of my brothers and sisters, my siblings are known, but I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce them. First of all, my brother Cameron, he's the oldest. very fine man. We all our brothers, we have no issues with one another, and our sisters, we love one another, and we've had such a happy childhood and such a happy adulthood, and it's so nice. No family feuds, because I'm kind of the hunk and they're a bit afraid of me. Anyhow, my brother Cameron today at 2:30 in Mount Sinai Hospital had a hip replacement. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's no reason why he couldn't be here. But Cameron was a leader, very prominent in high school, captain of the football team, captain of the hockey team, CEO of our Army Cadet Corps. He was someone we used as a role model and we're very proud of. And he became quite involved and was mayor of the city of Peterborough. Then our another brother is my brother Royden, who is one of the members of our family who can claim that ever since he moved to Lakefield in 1941, he's always lived in Lakefield, never strayed, and that's a tremendous thing. A lot of people don't realize, they recognize and remember us as being athletes, but Royden was one of the very best athletes in our family. He was, I think, without a doubt, the best softball, baseball hitter that we had, and he was also a fine goaltender. Royden has 6 children, and we've moved throughout North America pretty well. Next, we move along to my brother Dean, and Dean is, well, put it bluntly, he's the brains of the outfit. Yeah. Dean was intellectually gifted, and he's been able to help us. My brother Don mentioned that he'd do great in high school until they moved him away from his brother Dean. Yeah. Dean is married to his wife Rita, and they have 6 children, and one of the little events in their family is that they're leaving shortly to go to Philadelphia, as their granddaughter is being receiving her MD from University in Philadelphia. We move on to my brother Don, and Don is he was a comedian in our family. He would keep us laughing from morning to night over many, what outsiders might have thought to be silly things, but they weren't silly, were they, Don? No, sir. We had one pile of fun and one lot of humor. Then next is my sister Elaine, and I'd like Elaine and Cheryl, my 2 sisters, to come up here, please. And Derry, would you want to go and stand in the corner for a while? That's no reference whatsoever. You're not a dunce, Derry. Thanks, Derry. Okay. My sister Elaine, she's married. She had a real problem most of her life, having to deal with 4 older brothers and 1 younger brother that was a snitch. Elaine and Don were red-headed members of the family, which carries down from our grandfather Wasson, and hopefully our Irish tradition. And Elaine has 2 fine children, and also my next is, well, then there was Neil, and he never amounted to much, so we won't dwell at great lengths with him. And then there was my sister Cheryl. She's my younger sister. She's married and lives in Orono, and she has a family of 2 boys, real fine boys. One of them played for Canada's national volleyball team, but that didn't mean anything. The older we get, the less important sports seem to play in our lives. But in any event, they're wonderful children, and that's my young sister Cheryl. I'd now like to call on my brother Dean, who'll give a little bit of background to the Wasson family. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Frida, do you hear me? Yeah, maybe. Thanks, Neil, for the introduction. That was very nice of you. He probably embarrassed me so badly that I'll probably stumble through everything I have to say for the rest of the evening, but besides that, it was nice. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I see a number of people who were neighbors and friends in the village as I grew up, and it's nice to see you once again. I'm quite often introduced around Peterborough and Lakefield as the unknown Wasson. They can never get my first name correctly. So I decided tonight to come in disguise to really confuse people. I took my glasses off. I've worn glasses since I was 6 years old, and through the wonders of cataract surgery, I don't have to wear them anymore, except to read, and maybe I should get what I have to say here and read it. Now, Neil suggested that we, this evening, that we both be philosophical and humorous in anything that we might have to say. So I think that I'm going to try to cover that off early and sit down and be quiet for the rest of the evening. So on the philosophical note, I'm reminded of a quotation from Hillary Clinton. It was a speech that she gave in which she quoted the famous ancient African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." As our story unfolds this evening, I'm sure you'll see how this comes into play with the Wassons and the village of Lakefield. On the humorous side, I'm reminded of a speech my dad made, and he was quite a gifted public speaker, and I think that's where Neil gets a lot of his ability from, although he will say that he created it himself. The story goes that my dad was addressing a group of friends and neighbors as we were moving away from a neighborhood. And the speech went on and on and on. But he finally wound it up. And when he was finished, he was anxious to know whether he'd done well or not. So he rushed over to my mother and said, "Fern, how did I do?" Well, Fern said, "You did quite well. However, there was about 2 or 3 places you could have sat down." And I think that applies to Neil tonight too, so we'll have to watch it. Now, Neil also asked me to say a few words on how the Wassons ended up in Lakefield. And there's both a long story for that and there's a very abbreviated version. And I think you'll be happy that I'm only going to give you the abbreviated version. Now, as you know, each of us are made up from a very large ancestral gene pool. Unfortunately, we were no exception. It started with the Paynes, the Dumfords, the Boltons, the Crowes, the Battens, the Smiths, the Robinsons, and then the Wasson family. With the exception of the Robinsons, they all came to Dummer Township in the 1830-31 period and settled within a 10-mile radius of Warsaw. They started from England and from Ireland. They came from places like Warminster, Child Oakford, Cornwall, and the London area in England. The Wassons came from Belcoo, County Fermanagh in Ireland, and the Crowes from the Crowport, County Monaghan in Northern Ireland. We even had an ancestor with a place in Ireland named for him or after him. The earliest Robinson ancestor arrived in Plymouth, New Hampshire, USA in 1620, so we've been around quite a while. And with them arriving by a very circuitous route in Warsaw in the 1890. Consequently, we're related to many of the families in Lakefield and the Warsaw area. To name a few are the Paynes, the Battens, the Crowes, the Robinsons, Dumfords, Boltons, Darlings, Bells, Butlers, McCrackens, Taylors, Blewitts, Kids, Walls, Hatton, and the list goes on and on and on. In fact, when we were growing up, many of the kids in our community were cousins. Now, the main story starts with my mother, Fern Dumford, and my dad, Ralph Wasson. Dad was born in Warsaw, I think, as Neil alluded to, and mother on the Doer-Dummer boundary, known now as the Camp Road. Dad was a cheesemaker when we were young. He apprenticed at Warsaw and was then a proprietor of Pine Grove, Burley, and ending that career at Warminster in 1940. With the beginning of the war, better paying jobs became available in Peterborough, and Dad moved on to one of these. We as a family moved to Warsaw for a year, and when Cameron became of high school age, my mother, God bless her soul, insisted that we move to Lakefield to ease the burden on our finances and give us all a chance to attend the high school when the time arrived. So 6 children and mother and dad descended on the village. Needless to say, the village has never been the same since. We ranged then from 5 years old to 14 at the time, and Cheryl came along about 10 years later. As a result, we have varying memories of Lakefield and our friends and neighbors with whom we grew up. And that will be our story tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. I wanted to mention when I was introducing Dean that he was elected as an alderman in Peterborough, and that he also was manager of the Canadian General Electric Civilian Atomic Power Department. And he's very modest, but one touch of the finger and he could have blown us all to smithereens. I'd now like to get into our talking somewhat about Lakefield, and we have many memories, and I thought I'd just introduce some subjects. What memories do we have regarding some school days, if I may have? Any outstanding teachers that you have in mind, or any activities, or classmates, or? Well, thank you. We'll move on to the next subject. I'm sure we have something. I think my brother Don was on the verge, or Royden was. Yeah. Who was your teacher when you came to Lakefield, Royden?
Everett Sloan.
Everett Sloan, eh?
Very capable teacher. He taught me a lot. Couple of years I was there. He had great discipline, and which I needed. And then I go on to high school, and J.F. Harvey was a real gentleman teacher. A great guy, and he'd help you. But boy, don't get in the wrong side of him, because he knew how to handle fellas. That's about all I have to say about teachers.
Many of us don't realize or didn't know that John F. Harvey, who taught Royden and Cameron, and I don't think he taught you, did he, Dean? No. But in the older days, that his father at one time also was a principal of Lakefield High School, and that's recorded in our local history. And I never knew it until I was made aware of it. Don, you were one of the more apt students in our group, I'm sure. Yes, and he readily agrees. Yes. You attended school most days, did you not?
Yeah. Well, I was one that really didn't have an interest in excelling in school. There's no question about that. I left high school when I was 15 by my own initiative and invitation, actually. And I was probably 30 years old before I realized that I had a great teacher in Bob Sutton. And he was a tremendous force in our lives, and he taught us a lot of things beyond the school book learning. There was a lot of young guys around the high school in our time, and our fathers were in the army, our older brothers were gone, depending on the family situation. And he took it upon himself where there was no hygiene, in the sense that he taught a hygiene class to us young guys. And it come from combing your hair, being presentable if you needed to shave, which I didn't at that time, but shining your shoes and looking after yourself. And I think a lot of us carried that through life. I know I have. And him and I were never on the same page too often. But I was playing hockey in Lindsay one time, playing junior hockey in Lindsay, against Lindsay. And this guy come down the dressing room, and he had told me when I was leaving high school, he said, "You'll never be nothing but a ditch digger." And he wasn't too far wrong the way I was acting, but anyway, he come down the dressing room, and I always was fortunate enough, I had some good games in Lindsay. And he shook my hand and he said, "My God," he says, "I think you've made it." He said, "You're doing okay." So I got to appreciate Bob Sutton much, much more after I got older than I ever was when I was in high school. And I have another little story about school. There was a teacher came there from PCVS by the name of Howard Vaughn. I don't know, Ann Salmon must remember Howard Vaughn. And we weren't on the same page either. I couldn't understand it. But anyway, I got an award in Peterborough a couple years ago for insignificant accomplishments, and I'm sitting at home one day, a couple days after this happened, and the phone rings. And who's on the phone but Howard Vaughn? He's 93 years old, and he said, "I want to congratulate you on this award." He said, "Regardless of our differences," he said, "I thought there was maybe some good in you." So those are the kind of high school memories I had, and as I look back, they're positive. And contrary to what Neil says, I really didn't have a great interest in going to school. Ann would know all this because she was in the class with me. And I never ever skipped school. I never ever thought of not going to school because there was too many other things going on that you should be there. So that's my high school memories.
How about you, Elaine? Any school memories? How about your music teaching career? What did you know about that?
It was wonderful. I could make it so that someone would really rise up and be somebody and sing like a bird. But I had one boy in my class. Oh, okay. I had one boy in my class that, I don't know, whatever he did didn't seem to please me at all, and I kept rejecting him and rejecting him and rejecting him. I don't know how long it went on, but finally Mr. Sloan, the principal at that time, stepped in and said, "I think you better pass this boy. He's gone through enough." That boy was my little brother, Neil. And that's for it.
It was singing. Now, how many of you would believe that
Neil was so sweet when he was little, really. I can remember that he and I, when we were in public school, we worked at Warren Payne's grocery store. And I have the picture here of us there. And Neil, I guess, was really naive. I don't know. I guess he thought there was more to working in the grocery store than groceries and people. And the war was on at that time, and he was sort of interested in what went on in the war. So Pearl Henry worked there as well. She had been with Mr. Payne for quite some time. So he thought, well, I'll ask her. So he went up to Pearl and he said, "Pearl, what did women do in the war? Did they just knit socks? Is that all they ever did?" She became quite indignant. "No, that is not correct."
This is very nice, Elaine. This is a picture of one of my earlier contributors to my pension plan. There's a wonderful man and a quiet, gentle, really a wonderful man. A pleasure to work for Mr. Warren Payne, whose son Cam was married to Denise Edwards' sister, Leanne, and there's a picture of the four of us, hard-working people, and standing in the doorway of Warren Payne's store. There's Warren Payne, Pearl Henry, who married Floyd Walton, who used to be a Canada Bread member around here. Neil, I guess I'd be the assistant manager of the store. And my sister, Elaine. And Elaine, I hadn't seen that picture. I'd like to get an enlargement of that and cut the other three of you out. Yeah. Thank you ever so much. I got my sister Cheryl, you've had the longest time to prep, so you should be really gonna, each and every one of us had to have some schoolmates and some incidents in school, and
I would like to talk a little bit about the brush with celebrities that we would have had in the village. One year, I was president of the Girls Athletic Association in high school, and Ethel Mogan was our fearless leader at that time. And Bruce Thornley was the male phys ed teacher. And we had an athletic banquet every year, and it was always the high point for anyone that had been involved in sports. And coming from a sports family, I always felt like I had something to prove. And so prove it I did, and played most sports as I could, made most of the teams in high school, and we do have some trophies and accolades to go along with that. However, I don't remember what they are. But one of the high points was the athletic banquet. And this particular year, we had a fellow that was well known at that time, was Brian Watson. And he was going to be the guest speaker, and I knew that he knew my brother. And apparently he had come to my brother's house to visit before he was coming over to the banquet. And I was very excited about that. And I had borrowed my sister's high heels to wear to the banquet. And as the president of the Girls Athletic Association, I had the job of thanking him for his appreciated speech. And we were exiting the stage, and I hit the top step and didn't hit any of the others. But I'm very pleased to say, with my athletic prowess, I landed on my feet. And Brian Watkins said to me, "Nice exit."
see, they're all pretty good when they get going, you know. I think we'll move along now into some of the more memorable things that happened. I'd like to just comment on our high school cadets. Years ago, when all of us went to high school except my sister Cheryl, our cadet corps was a pretty important thing, and we would drill for weeks, and drill marching and slope arms and deodorant underarms, and all those things. We did a number of things, and then we had an inspection day, and we all really took them serious and tried to do our best. One time, my very good friend, Gord Coyle, and I, and a number, Queen Elizabeth, I think it was 1951 maybe, 50 or 51, she came to visit in Canada with Prince Philip. They looked like a nice couple to me, but anyhow, we were recruited as a group that would go down and guard them. So we went to Peterborough, and our Lakefield Cadet Corps got on the train in Peterborough, and there was a bunch of people from Lindsay that we didn't particularly care for, and my good friend Dick McCracken, who was as easy to get along with as anybody you could ever imagine, but somehow he took a dislike to some of these guys from Lindsay, and we fought all the way to Trenton. And I think we came out on top most cases. Anyway, we got to Trenton, and we got out, and we stood there in the side of the dusty old road, hungry, tired, wool uniforms on. It was a hot day. Prince Philip and Princess Elizabeth came driving by, whoosh, threw dust all over us. That was all we saw. Now, I said to Gord, what do you think? And he said, well, I think that girl shows promise. And sure, behold, he was right, for she became queen. Gordon and I then took up more guard duties. We were very heavy on the guards. He was a guard dog, and I was just we guarded Winston Churchill's grave in England. Both of us at attention and guarded it for 10-15 seconds, right, Gail? Yeah. And we had a lot of work like that. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly in our high school, and I'm sure Don and Dean and everyone, they came along, and you could work all week, and you'd maybe make $7 to $10 in your summer holidays working. And if you could master the Morse code, then they gave you a test, and you would get payment, a check of $10 from the Department of Defense. Well, my brother Dean told me that not only was that, there was an advanced one that came along. I never got the advanced, but I got the $10. You get the $10, Red? No. Well, you
got my 10.
Yeah. You studied the remorse code then. Anyway, it was wonderful. That part, I've always been thankful for that. One last thing on the cadet camp. One summer, and they give the smartest, there was a big competition in our thing anyway, to go to cadet camp at Ipperwash on Lake Huron. That's where poor Dudley George was shot dead by OPP inadvertently or whatever. I can't get into that. But I served as a boy soldier there at camp. And lo and behold, two of my fellow comrades, I might call them, were Gord Coyle and Dick McCracken. Well, it was just wonderful. We just had a great time. The one thing I remember, this one guy, for no reason at all, you can imagine that, took a dislike to me, and he attempted to beat me up, and my good friend Dick came to my rescue, thank God. Anyway, I don't know what the hospitals were like up that way, but I would have found out. Anyway, Dick looked after me there, and then one time we went, they took us all roller skating in Grand Bend, which isn't that far from Camp Ipperwash, and Dick got out doing twirls and barked up his knee. It bled quite a bit. So that was really my cadet memories of Lakefield boys. Did anyone else have any? My brother Don played in the band. He played the bugle. Yeah. And
It's a bit of a misnomer. I carried a bugle around, but I really couldn't get music out of a Stuart Warner radio. But anyway, how I come to get in the band, and it was a kind of a sad time, but we were out before we were formed up, and we had these cooey rifles, I think they called them, and we were kind of letting on. We were soldiers of the day anyway, and I think my brother Cam and Bill Hudson and I think Jack Chittick and some of the older guys anyway, they took exception to the way we were carrying on. So anyway, they singled me out and were giving me hell, and I threw the rifle down on the ground and said, "To hell with you, I'm not carrying the rifle no more." That's the end of it. So anyway, geez, they court-martialed me. And they couldn't kick me out of the cadets because it was a mandate from the service at the time. So they put me in the band, and I carried the bugle for the rest of my career. Yeah. That was the end of my rifle carrying, and I really I couldn't play anything, but I kept it shiny and I looked after it and in good shape.
Don, do you have any memories of those days riding? How about you, Elaine? You?
Assist when the cadets.
Yeah.
We had a ladies' branch too. Wasn't it just?
We did have a ladies' branch.
Yeah.
I can remember marching in it, but one thing that we did have was an extracurricular thing that went on, which was gymnastics by some girls. I have some pictures here. I'm not sure of all the names, but there was Barb Leonard, myself, Lee, oh, I'm sorry, Mark Calbury. I don't know all the names. Anyways, here are some pictures where we did gymnastics as a sideshow when when the bands were there, when the cadets were
Yeah,
there.
when they had the inspection,
Yes.
girls would put on quite a show.
That's right.
Yeah.
A very good show, yeah.
Would have been a better show if your shorts were a few inches shorter.
Oh, give me a break.
But it was good.
We didn't
I
want to wear
remember
shorts in
that.
the first place.
I remember those very well, Emma. Yeah, and there's a picture of Dee Edwards and Mark Calbury, Denise and Mark Calbury, Jeanette Staples, Fraser Girl, Nancy Dowd, Barbara Leonard, and all your good school friends. Thank you. Now, one of the big things in Lakefield was work. Like, times weren't all that great, and they were tough, although we didn't realize maybe how tough they were, but everybody had a job, doing one thing or another, or so on. And my brother Don, he was kind of the workaholic in the family. And I'd like to swing back to him because I'm telling you, he worked at some places that many of you people won't even know existed as thriving businesses in the village of Lakefield.
This is going to take quite a while if I cover all my work history, but I started out, Dean and I actually were hired by the McManus boys to do the chores in the morning and night. And actually it was a time that I treasure still because we learned how to milk a cow, and we learned how to clean the pig pen once a week, and we learned how to separate. And we were not farm boys, although we always grew up in a rural area. But one time we discovered a pair of kicking chains up on the windowsill in the barn. And this one cow, you'd kind of get milking along there, and she'd kind of kick the can there, kick the old pail a bit. And so anyway, we decided enough of that, we put the kicking chains on, but we turned the cow out with them on. And it got down in the doorway, and we couldn't get the chains off, and it couldn't get up, so we had to go down to the sawmill and get one of the boys to come home to get the kicking chains off the cow. So anyway, needless to say, they put those away. There was no more of that. Well, then I worked for the McManus boys, and what a treasure that was. These guys, they were so good to me, it was pitiful. There was Jack and Leo and Mickey, and I was normally partnered up with Mickey because he kind of was about the only one that had time to put up with me. But I got to tell this story. Kevin Hefferman knows this story inside out, but Mickey and I had old Dan the horse, and we were drawing the sawmill down to the mill. And every morning, Mick would pull up to Russ Hopkins' garage, and he'd say, "Jesus, Don, we better get a lime Ricky." So normally I'd hop in and get the lime Ricky, and Mick would stay there with Dan. And this one day, I don't know why, but Mick said, "I'm going in." He maybe wanted to get a package of tobacco, I don't know what, but anyway, I'm there. And I'd never had a chance to drive Dan, so I thought, well, now here's an opportunity, I'll just pull Dan ahead of it. And little did I know, but the minute you moved Dan, if you didn't know what you were doing, he turned for home. So I couldn't hold him, and he took a sharp turn to the left to get to the road to get home, and my God, we tore the tongue out of the saw machine. Stripped her right out, and putting her upset it. Mick comes out, Jesus, what happened? So anyway, we thought, well, we better get down the mill and tell Leo what's going on. He was kind of the boss, and Jack was a little sparky. He didn't put up with too much nonsense. And so anyway, we go down. Now Mickey said, "Listen, I want to tell you one thing. When we get down there, I was driving the horse." So I was happy about that, and that's the way we carried that out. So they come up anyway. We're laid up for 2 days getting a tongue back in the saw machine. But anyway, Jack come up just shortly after Leo arrived, and Leo, he was pretty calm. He didn't say much to us about it. And Jack was jumping around there, and how are we going to get this fixed? And Leo said, you better go back, Jack, and take care of the tractor. We'll be going to saw pretty soon. So that ended that, and I never drove Dan again. That was the end of my... So then, the next time I got out of school anyway, and I went to, as a glove cutter apprentice at the Ackerman Glove, up in the top end of town there, 17 cents an hour. And we were cutting gloves and leather mitts and all that kind of stuff. Ruby Nichols worked there, and Charlie McDermott's wife, they were on staff there. And I worked there for, I don't know, 6 months or so, and I didn't think that was much good, so I moved on to Lakefield Canoe, working for Jimmy Sharman. What a treat that was. Anyway, Jimmy, he was an Englishman, and he was a good man, but we never really were on the same page. Anyway, as I tell people, I lost a lot of work through sickness. My boss got sick of me. But anyway, we're working there one day, and First Calvary was on staff, I think, and I can't remember. But anyway, Jimmy sent us up on the roof. They had that old sawtooth roof there at the time. I think Jump was probably working there too. And Jimmy said, I want you to kind of, the ice would build up there and then it would run down and leak inside. And he said, I want you guys, and he gave us a pickaxe and some other utensils. Said, what, want to chip that ice out? Well, we were kind of in our enthusiasm, we were driving the pick right down through the roof. So Jimmy come up, but he wouldn't come up on the roof, and he got up on the ladder and he's yelling down at us and said, lads, shut her down. But anyway, we kept picking away, but eventually we realized he was serious about something, so we shut down. Come over anyway. And then that carried on for a while. We worked away there. I'll never forget Dick Martin was working there. We were out moving a bunch of planks, and by this time J.P. Richer had come there, and Dick said, you know, this was a great place to work, he said, until that Frenchman come here. And now it's just hurrah, hurrah. Yeah, never forgot that. I could go on here for half an hour. I better not, I'll shut her down.
Yeah. Brian, do you have any working memories you can tell us? They have this canoe museum. You worked at the Lakefield Canoe, the Peterborough Canoe. You worked, you knew boats pretty well. Is there anything you would like to share with us?
I think you pretty well summed it up there.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you? Any of your working experience? No, I'd like to really add a note about Principal Sutton, if I could. He always encouraged us to stay in school. So I was quite surprised one day he came up to me and said, Dean, I know there's a job opening down at what is now Lakefield Research. And he said, you know, you could go there and apprentice and that would be a pretty good career for you. I said, well, sounds all right to me. So he sent me down, arranged an appointment with Doug Weaver. I went down one evening and we talked to Doug Weaver. I guess he took Sutton's recommendation, so he hired me. And that's one probably extracurricular thing that a teacher might have done for someone, and he did it for me, and I always appreciated that. Equally, later on in my career, I wanted to enroll in the certified program for a certified general accountant, so you had to get some references. So I gave Sutton a call on the phone and said, you know, could you like me a letter of reference to the CGA Association recommending that I probably could complete the program successfully. So he wrote me a letter, and it was a very nice letter. Said, I'm sure this gentleman will do well in the program. As far as I can recollect, he was probably first in his class when he left school in grade 12. So there again,
it helps, you know, Red, to stay on good terms with the teacher.
You're sure they hadn't you confused with my brother Don?
No, I don't think so.
You have any work experience, Shirley, you'd like to mention?
Yeah, sure.
When I was all the way through high school, like not through the winter months, but through the summer months, I worked at the Kawartha Bakery, and that was at my mother's suggestion. She thought I should get a job. So I went there and asked them if they were hiring, and I got to work with people like Mary Bell there, and Marilyn King, a lot of different kids from around the area. And I ended up there working every summer for all the way through high school, which was about 5 years, because I spent 2 in grade 12.
And Elaine, you told us about your career in the grocery business. Yeah.
I got one experience here. This is a very traumatic experience in my lifetime. Every summer, when spring came around, Clara and Cherry used to recruit a bunch of lads in the village to go out and clean up the grounds at Wantassa Inn. And he always picked cousins, and we being very close cousins, we were on the team. So about 5 of us would go out, and I can't remember the name of all of them, but I'm sure Red was there, being one of the better workers in town. So we went out and for the weekend, we worked and we raked and we cleaned and we burned leaves and we did about everything. So we were coming back in, and Clarence says, well, I got no change to pay you guys, but tell you what I'll do, I'll give your money to Dean, and when he gets to the village, he can get it changed and give you all your money. So on the way, we came to Butler's store at Hall's Glen, and everybody says, well, I want to go up, stop and go in and get some candy. So Clara wheels into the driveway, and we stop and we go in and we get some BB bats. And you know, they're covered with paper, and we stripped the paper off the BB bats, and everybody was having a good time. We piled back in the car and headed down the highway, and then the BB bat paper started to fly out the window. And we got down about 5 miles, and I looked in my pocket for the money, and it was gone. I'd thrown it out the window. The end of that story is that we got back to Lakefield, and good old Clarence as he was, he rounded up the money for everybody but me.
I'd like to move on now and speak briefly. We're running out of time, and we could talk all night and then some, but we're running out of time. I'd like to talk just a little bit about our sports. Sports was a very big thing in our life, and you made a lot of really good friends. Kevin Heffernan and I played sports together against one another, starting in public school and playing 6 and 4 is 10, all you red lions out of your den, and we tore clothes off each other, and Fern and Ella were weak sewing on buttons and patching here and there, but it was all so much fun, and sports was a wonderful, wonderful release, and sports had no class structure to it. You either give the effort and you were there, or you didn't. There was nobody was put down through sports. So I know that we all had great memories. We played hockey, we played softball, my older brothers played football, rugby we always called it, never called it football at high school, and I'd just like to pass it down here and quickly if you have what memories you might have regarding, and some of your teammates please. I'd like to hear about some of your teammates.
Well, football is the most memorable thing that I have from high school, and we had a team for I think about 3 years, and I played on the team, I think, for a couple of the 3 years as quarterback, and Ren was what we called our tight end. Well, whenever we needed a real surefire play, we used to send Ren out and he'd hide in the long grass. And our passer would pick him out for sure, and it was a surefire first down or touchdown or whatever we needed. But our greatest, I think someone mentioned Mr. Vaughn, who was at PCVS, and he got let go there because he didn't do well at coaching their football team. And they were a pretty prominent football group in their day. So he came up and he coached us for a year at Lakefield. And lo and behold, we got an exhibition game with the PCS juniors, and we beat them. I don't know what the score was, 10-5 or something. Well, that had to be the highlight of any sporting career for anybody. Like Lakefield, beating the big burly guys from the borough in football. So that,
Yeah. And I'd just like to pass this down. Elaine, do you have any sporting memories?
I do. I'd really like to share one with you. My brother Dean, bless his heart, got me into the GE working when I was a young teenager. And I worked in General Motors. And at that time they had a hockey team of, I don't know how many teams there weren't that many, but they were all GE employees. And of course I, learning to skate at a very young age, promoted my skating all throughout my public school and high school days. In fact, I often thought I grew up in rinks and ballparks. But this one game was really crucial. We really had to win. And I got the puck in our end, and I thought, well, I'm really going to show them how good I am. So I skated down that ice and stick-handled this puck really well. But I was going too fast.
I thought you were going the wrong way.
And I didn't calculate that I'd have to stop at some point. Because when you go skating, you just keep going around and around and around. It doesn't happen in hockey. So you have to remember, I thought and acted very quickly. I thought, what am I going to do? Do I take the boards? Do I take the net or take the goalie? So when I got there, actually, I tripped. I took the goalie and the net. Never hit the boards. And I was lying there and I felt so bad that I hit the goalie because, you hate to hit another girl. But the referee was really slow. He didn't pick up on anything. They were all worried about the goalie. And I thought, well, what about me? But anyways, I looked down and remember, things are going fast. The puck was outside the line and the referee had never blown the whistle. So I pushed it in with my skate. And when the referee decided, he said, "They got a goal." I want to finish this off by saying, I shall never, ever pull a skate thing, a Monty skate, ever again.
And that's how we boys got the name of being dirty player.
Absolutely. I had an opportunity to play fastball for Bobby Crow in Lakefield. Played a couple of years before I got married and left town. And Bobby Crow gave the toast to the bride at my wedding for me. And he claimed that he taught me how to catch Burke by telling me to run like a boy. I'd just like to mention as well, growing up, Kathy, you might have to help me with this. I can never remember if it's plus 15 or minus 15. But Neil was 15 when I was born, and so I had a lot of years of watching sports from a very young age. And East City Bowl was a favorite summer spot for the Lakefield Charltons. And I got to see a lot of players that played with my brothers. And but I did it from a snack bar point of view. If you spent a lot of time at the snack bar because I didn't really like sitting still. But my brother Neil could run really fast, and I knew that. And I was always upset when watching my brother Red play hockey, and my mom tells me I cried because they kept trying to hit Donnie with this black thing.
Well, naturally, I played all the sports that they've mentioned here, but I never excelled in any of them, so. But I done my best and I enjoyed it. At one period in my life, I was playing for about 4 teams, a public school, a high school, juvenile team, and I had a junior team. And man, I wasn't very old, but I could dodge those pucks as well as stop them. So anyways, my career didn't last too long in the hockey world and or any of the other ones. I remember one time we were playing PCBS and football, rugby, and all line up, you know, the kickoff. So I was bolting down the field, and I was this big guy on the other side. I think his name was Ackerman. Oh God, he hit me, and then he trapped all over me. Just about ended me for the game. There's other things, but I can't just call them right now.
Well, I don't know, I mean, there's tons of stories about sports, you could go on forever about this stuff, but one time we were playing up in Bob Cajun, I don't know, are there any of the Jewell family here, any of, I forget, I had his name written down here now, and I shouldn't forget, but Harry, and he was coaching us in Bob Cajun, and we played against Bob Cajun at a hell of a hockey club, and in that given year, I think they'd won the juvenile championship about 3 years in a row. And we're up in Bob Cajun there in that old rink. You could screw the light bulbs out standing on the ice, but we're in there anyway, and I don't know how it happened, but we got ahead of them 3-0 in the first period. And Harry comes in, and I don't want to demean Harry, but I don't think he could think of anything else. He was probably thunderstruck that we were up 3 goals. And he said, "Listen, guys," he said, "keep the goals you got and stay ahead, and we'll take this club on their home ice." So it was as good an advice as you could get at the time, and they wound up beating us 8-3. So yeah, they didn't make us give any back, but yeah, but we had some great times playing sport, playing hockey, and Kevin Hefferman knows all these stories. He was with us there, and Dick McCracken was there, and Gordy Coyle, and Bill Twist, and yeah, Neil was there, and Cam, and Chump, he retired and started building boats. He was smart, he got out of the game of hockey, but we had some great times. I could keep you going here for half an hour, but that's all I got at the moment.
It was, my behalf, it was always such a thrill to play sports, and we got recognition that at that time and that stage we weren't getting through any other avenues. And maybe at the police station, but we just weren't getting any so sports was wonderful, and some of my happiest memories is playing hockey with me being the young lad, playing with my brother Cameron, my brother Dean, my brother Don, and myself. And then I had so many happy memories playing with Kevin Heffernan, Gord Coyle, Wayne Heffernan, Dick McCracken, Bill Twist, and all the Lakefield boys, and we had very good teams. And Tommy Birch, I should mention Tommy Birch. And hockey was very rough then, but it was more manly. There wasn't the stuff that goes on now, but I told you there was a lot of fisticuffs. I was fortunate that I had some really good dukers on my side. So that we come through. One of my really strong memories of childhood is going up to the Grove School. And the Grove, it seemed to me then at that time, was much more open and friendly with the town and the townspeople. And G. Winder Smith was just a wonderful man, and he'd help anybody. If he saw you playing, the Grove was playing against a town team, and some kid didn't have a pair of shin pads, next time they came to play, G. Winder Smith had a pair of shin pads for that boy. And so we used to go up on Saturday mornings, and we'd go up about 10 o'clock. And that lad there, he's very shy and he's very humble, but he was one fantastic hockey player. In fact, he led the Peterborough Junior Bees in scoring when he was 15 years old, and he made the Oshawa General Junior team when there was a 6-team Ontario League. Kevin Heffernan did. That's how good he was. He was just fantastic. People didn't realize that. I just got to say that one time Kevin and I were up at Halliburton, and we were helping a guy wire a cottage up there, and we met Baldy Cotton, who's the chief scout for the Boston Bruins, in the restaurant. So Kevin went over and said hello to him, and he said, Kevin said, I doubt if you remember me. He said, I certainly remember you. And if you had kept doing what we wanted you to do and you'd have stuck with us, we would have put you in the NHL. And I heard that with my own words. And you remember that day, Kevin? Yeah. Anyhow, we'd go up to the Grove School and we'd play from about 10 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon as it got dark. And Mr. Smith would take us in to the dining room, and we'd have toast and hot chocolate. And then we'd come back up, and I kid you not, it would not be uncommon for Kevin to score 30 goals in a day. And they got that. And some people had 30 goals in a year. They got sick of seeing them. Anyway, those were some of my very happy memories. And it isn't whether you won or lost when we look back. It's the friends you made and the good times. And we have a lot more stories than that. I think we've kind of ran over our time, and we certainly haven't finished our input, but we just can't keep you going forever, so I think we're going to pretty well shut it down. Is there anything we have, last words from anyone? I'm sorry? Oh, yes. Okay. Don can best describe that. Yeah. Dean, you had a word? Ray Judd era, Don?
I wanted to comment a little bit about the fact that I used to take papers, and it was the morning paper route that I was on, the Globe and Mail, and you have to get up at 6:30 and trudge down to the bus stop and pick up about, 40 to 50 papers and trudge them all over the village of Lakefield. I went from Leonard's hardware store over to where Doc Gassel had his office, and back up around and up to where Richardson's lived up on the hill and back home. But on all that route, there were two patrons that still stick out in my mind. 3 actually, but one I can't mention. But the first one was Doc Masterson. You remember Doc Masterson? I used to take his paper, and every year at Christmas he would give me a $10 bill as a tip, and I thought that was great. But my mother, she was terribly upset. She thought the doc was trying to turn me Catholic. The other one I remember was, and this is Hull, Effie Hull. I learned after I married Frida to call her Aunt Effie, because she's my wife's aunt. And I'm sure that when I started to go with Frida, she was a very kind lady, and I'm sure she put in a good word for me. And the other one was Lynn Erskine is here tonight. I used to take the paper to her parents' house, and every morning when I walked by, there was always a girl at the piano playing the piano. She knows who it is.
So, any other closing remarks, Don? We've had a request that we delve into a little our Lakefield sporting group, we had tremendous success in the softball field. We won the championship at Peterborough a number of years, and we won the Ontario Championship 3 years. And we were privileged to have some great teammates and some great teams, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of memories. And I'd like my brother Don to elaborate on that, because we had one of the, you can take it from there.
Well, the Charlton started in 1956, and the prior year to that, 55, we were known as the Kingdon Lumber, and partway through the season in June, Ray Judd fell into our lap. He was a Mormon missionary from Arizona, and he came here as a missionary. And Barry Seabrook, who had an electrical store over in East City, who had married a cousin of my father's, and he knew we were always the doormats in the league, and we had some good players, but we weren't good enough to compete with some of the Peterborough guys, and they wouldn't come and play with us because they had better teams. So anyway, he came down to the bench this given night, and we just got beat. And if you knew my brother Cam, you would understand that he didn't take kindly to that kind of stuff, and we got drubbed many a time. And so Barry come to the back of the bench, and he said, you know, he said, I think I found you a pitcher. Cam says, not another one of them GD pitchers. He says, we've tried out every guy in Southern Ontario. He said, we don't need to look at another one. I said, geez, hold the bet, Cam. And I'd been reading in the Globe and Mail that morning about this guy, Judd, that had struck out all these batters in Lindsay. I think it was 21 or something. So I said, I think, what's this guy's name? And he said, it's Judd. Well, I said, we better look at him, Cam. And anyway, Cam settled down, smashed the spikes down the ground, and he was upset. Anyway, make a long story short, we contacted Judd, and he came to pitch for us. And we hadn't, I don't think, won a game by that time in the City League, but we managed to win enough games, get in the playoffs, won City League championship as Kingdon Lumber. Judd comes back the next year, and in his time, he went in the Army in 1958, but we won 3 Ontario championships, and I think the Charltons probably won 5 or 6 city championships, and it was just a great time in our time. It was great for Lakefield, and I can tell you that they're still talking about the Lakefield Charltons 50 years after we played, so it was a great time, and we had some great teams, played against great players, and I wish Cam was here, but Cam was the architect of us even having a club in the City League. And not a lot of people know this, but in Ontario at that time there were 2 great pitchers. One, Metro Zarek, who pitched in Sudbury, and Ray Judd, who was pitching in Peterborough. And Cam caught both those guys. When he lived in Sudbury, he caught Zarek, and when he was in Peterborough, he caught Ray Judd, which is a major accomplishment, and not a lot of guys get to do that. So, Ray Judd was a treasure to us, still a good friend, and he lives in Arizona, and I talk to him 2-3 times a year, and he's still a great friend, great ball player. And when he came to us, just to finish, we had no idea how good he was. We'd never seen anybody of that caliber. We didn't know. And I think the gutsiest performance I've ever seen on a softball field, we had never seen him pitch. Cam took a uniform over to where he was boarding on Reed Street, left it there with the landlady. Judd put it on, came over to the park, and the first time we ever seen this guy pitch, Ray Judd, him and Cam were warming up out in right field, and that's the first Cam ever seen him. And this guy could, I mean, he threw rise balls, drop balls, you name it, he could throw them. And we were playing East City in that given night, and they were the cream of the crop. They were the top club. They were winning everything. And for Cam to go in there and catch Ray Judd was really something. I mean, it was incredible how good Judd was, and having never seen a guy of that caliber, it was a great feat. So the Charltons are something that Lakefield can genuinely be proud of, not because we played on them, but partly a man that made a great contribution, two people to that team, was Garnet Samus and Percy Archer. Percy was a trainer, and he looked after Judd like he was a racehorse. And Garnet looked after all the business and looked after all the interaction we needed with the leagues. And we weren't well received in the City League in Peterborough because we wouldn't give up the Lakefield name. And they were really upset about that. The president of the OASA lived in Peterborough. And I think if you go back in the records, one year we won the OASA All-Ontario Championship, and he has us listed as a Peterborough team. But we were anything but, and they were great times.
In any small town, there's people who are, like Lakefield was so small, people didn't have cars. That's another subject we could have got in, the first cars in the neighborhood, and this, that, and the other. And we were certainly quite isolated. And the people were so wonderful. And you hear the old story, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I'm telling you, the adults and the returning soldiers from the war and the airmen and the Navy people, they took an interest in the youth. And many of them were in the service when their youth, and they spent it in there, fighting for our freedoms, and so on. And they were so kind and so protective and so demanding on us kids when we were growing up, and it was wonderful. No laments whatsoever. Many of the kicks in the pants, or the half cuff up the side of the head I've had downtown, and I never went home told my dad because he was tougher than any of them, and he'd give me 2 or 3 more, but I deserved every one of them, and they were it was such a wonderful time to grow up there. And there were people who had lasting influence upon you. And I just like to name 2 or 3 that had lasting influence upon me. Certainly, Red mentioned Garnet Samus, and Garnet Samus was just a wonderful man. He was kind. He gave help and money to us in sporting endeavors that I don't really think that he had at all times, but he just helped us out so much. He drove us all over. He supported us in so many ways, and he motivated us, and he motivated us to be better people and to be responsible people, and that was just a tremendous influence on me. Some other people who were an influence on me were, in fact, I was subject to influence. I was under the influence quite a bit when I was... the other fellows that I should mention, Jack Mose. He was similar. Jack Mose was just a wonderful, wise man. A kind man, knowledgeable man, and just a wonderful man. I was so proud to be a friend of his in later life, and I've had so much guidance and direction from him. Another person who had a great influence upon me as a role model was Mr. Frank Coyle, Gene Chittick's father. And Frank, it didn't matter your age, it didn't matter your level of success or achievements. If you went and asked him a question and anything to do, he'd I just got to give you one example. I was a responsible person. I always paid my bills, but I didn't always have money. And I had I had a car one time, beautiful car, 50 Chev, you know, the one that your cousin tried to step all over the upholstery. Anyhow, I had this 50 Chev. And I was changing jobs. I forget where I was going. Anyway, I was changing jobs and didn't have any money. So I phoned up the finance company and I said, I'm going to miss a payment. But I said, I'll make it up to you. I had this job and I'm going to have the job and I'll make it up. Well, later on I got to know this is some hacky in the office and so on. No, we're coming out, we'll pick it up if you don't make the payment. So I bought the car off Frank Coyle. I went over to Frank, I said, Frank, this, that, and the other. He said, and Frank could get quite angry. I'll talk to that son of a bitch, he said. He said, I'll tell you one thing, Neil. They may have the right to pick it up, but they'll only pick it up and you phone me over here and I'll come over to your house and deliver the car to you and you can drive me back to Dredge, because he said, I am not standing for that. That's the kind of fellow that Frank Coyle was. And Frank Coyle, I was, he was the father of one of my friends, but he was just a wonderful man. And the village was full of good men and good influences. I wonder if any of the other you wish to comment on anybody that had a noticeable influence upon you?
Well, I think the meeting or the gathering couldn't go by without paying some reference to the Lions Club in the village. When I grew up, anyway, I don't know about when Neil, but they sponsored everything. Where they got the time and the talent, I don't know, but in particular, they sponsored Teen Town, and for some reason or other, somebody selected me as mayor of Teen Town. So I got to know the Lions Club people pretty well, and in particular, I got to know Stan Richardson and his daughters here tonight, and he was just a wonderful person who interacted with us, we Teen Town Council members, and anything we needed, he was able to get it from the Lions Club. So that's another way that a village reaches out and raises the children.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to mention one other person that I thought would be at that caliber was Harry Stabler. I nurtured the juvenile team along there for quite a few years up until you played, Red. And a good fellow
I got a
all
list
around.
here if you want to list them all.
Well,
This won't be too difficult. You can read them all.
where do I start?
Right there at the bottom.
Well,
Can you read
perhaps you
that?
better do that.
All right. Here I go again.
Brighton and Red have some eye problems, and between the two of them, they're pretty good.
That's what ruined my career as a goaltender. It was a weakness for shots. I had to catch. But people that I just write down here that had an influence on me, with me, and Garnet Samus, Percy Archer, Harry Stabler, Dr. Skip Bean, George Ponzi Chapel, and Harry Jewell. And there were lots of others. Like I see Arnold Graham sitting back there, and he used to keep all my goaltending equipment in good shape. And I mean, he gave me his Air Force uniform when he come back from the service. Can you imagine? I had the tunic, and geez, I was the cream of the crop in town because I had the Air Force. All the other guys were wearing Army stuff. So I've never forgotten Arnold for that, and he did a good. There's tons of guys. I mean, you could go on and on here, but Chubb's got some here.
Well, one other I'd like to mention. When I was about 14, 15, we had a ball team here, but we were pretty well stuck to the village. But anyways, there was a guy around here with the name of Bob Hudson, and he had a car and jammed it full of us, the ball players, and drove to Maynooth, and we played the game up there. I forget whether we won or lost, but I do remember us driving, and I was not a driver at the time, but he would just bore it to the first corner he came to, and then he'd jam on the brakes, round the corner, and then he'd flatten her out again. Well, I was never so glad to get home and on my way. We made it all as well, and Bob was a good guy.
I'd like to mention my sister-in-laws, Helene and Betty, Frida, Marie, and Gail, and my sister Elaine. All great influences in my life.
Thanks, Cher. That was so well deserved, and I neglected to do that before. I should have done that. Yeah. In fact, how many here are related to the Wassons or descendants of the Wassons? Put up your hands, please. Yeah. May I see that again, please? Yeah. Patricia, hide the cookies.
I would just like to say something about we as kids at home when we were in our formative years. Like we moved here in 1941 and I was 7 or 8 and Neil was younger. Our dad was in the Army and one day my mom decided to go shopping and she walked over town. And Neil and I made a decision, we must have agreed on it because we did it. We burnt the grass around our house. We did not know what we were doing, we didn't have a clue. It got out of hand. We just didn't know what to do. But thank God some neighbor phoned the fire department. Really thankful about that. And of course, I don't know where Neil disappeared to, but they kept telling me to get away from the fire, because it just had the whole field going and was heading towards the barn. And so I went out on the road and I looked down the road and I seen my mom coming. Well, she didn't notice anything at first. She was just walking along with her parcels, and all of a sudden she seen the commotion, and she seen the fire, and bless her heart, she tried to run, but she couldn't, and she grasped her chest, and I think her heart stopped. And I just said one thing that I'm so happy about at that time. I was glad Dad was in the Army.
Well, we're going to call it an evening. There's so many things that we didn't even get into. Like, I'd like to be able to tell you about the rationing that went on then, about the end of the Second World War, about the parties, the feasts, the different things. We could keep you entertained if you have been entertained for another 2 or 3 hours easily. I'd like to thank the people who organized this and invited us. I'd like to thank Sheila for the beautiful display of pictures that we have up here. I'd like to compliment you fellas for being so quiet and attentive, and someday you'll be an old fogey like us and you'll be up telling about what happened when you were young. Yeah. It's been a real pleasure, and I know that speaking on behalf of my brothers and sisters, we enjoyed it immensely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we'll go on for another hour or so. I just wanted to present to our Historical Society a little token that my brother Don brought up this evening. It's a commemorative plate on the 125th anniversary of the Lakefield Baptist Church. And hey, it's in fine condition, and Don being quite a patron, you drove by it a few times, did you not, Don? Yeah. We'd like to donate this to our to our Lakefield Historical Society. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just before we do the picture, Neil, I would just like to say a special thank you to the Wasson family for coming and entertaining us. They talked about all the people that influenced them, and I started to worry. All of these nice people, and they were influenced by all of these nice people. So what went wrong? Of course I'm kidding. Of course I'm kidding. This was a wonderful talk, and Neil is probably the only one known not to be introverted. You've noticed. Just before you go, I want to remind you of a couple of things. First of all,